you have my number? Good morning, everybody. I think we have only 1 hour today, so we better start. I see the people are coming in. I also see 36 people online, so that's fine. So good morning, everybody. So today we are going to speak about food system sustainability because it's really a pressing topic, as we are still expecting that the European Commission will publish both the long overdue revision of the animal welfare legislation and also the key deliverable of the farm to fork strategy, the framework for a sustainable EU food system. So improved animal welfare is an important part of food sustainability, so that's why we're discussing it also here. And improved animal welfare should go together with changes in food consumption patterns towards less and better animal products and more plant-based diets. The farm to fork strategy makes it clear that it will not reach a healthy, sustainable food system without a dietary shift and the creation of food environments that makes a healthy, sustainable choice also easier. Today, our two speakers will address food system sustainability from the farmers to the consumers and talk about the problems, the solution, and share also their recommendations on policy. So I'm very happy to have with us this morning Philippe Lymbery, Global CEO of Compassioning World Farming International and visiting professor at the University of Winchester Center for Animal Welfare. And then we are also this morning, Eric Lambin is coming to join us, member of the group of the chief scientific advisors of the European Commission and professor of geography and sustainability science at the Université Catholique de Louvain, the one I was in too also, by the way, and Stanford University. So we will first listen to Philippe Lymbery's presentation, 60 Harvards left. If you don't have this book, please, I think you can command it, which is the title of the most recent book, where he shows how current industrialized food production threatens soils, the planet, and ultimately even our ability to produce food in the future. Following this, we will hear from Eric Lambin on sustainable food consumption. The EU's scientific advice mechanism released its evidence review report and policy recommendation on sustainable food consumption in June. So this scientific advice mechanism was asked to provide scientific advice on how to overcome the obstacles that prevent sustainable food consumption. After listening to the two speakers, we will open the floor, of course, as always, for questions and answers. I will make just some brief announcement. First of all, you know that we made a letter to the Vice President designate, he is already Vice President, but to Maros Sefcovic, because the recent hearing of the Vice President designate brought more information on where we stand with the still outstanding Commission proposals on animal welfare. Of course, I don't need to tell you that the Animal Welfare Intergroup is very disappointed about the absence of any commitment on a precise timeline for the delivery of the 3 remaining proposals on animal welfare. It seems only that the proposal on animal transport might be ready soon, but not publishing the entire legislative package during this political term would be a democratic failure, considering that the European Parliament, the Council, the industry, the farmers, the citizens, the NGOs and other stakeholders have been discussing this revision for several years, not only in a civil dialogue groups established by DG Agri, but also under the platform on animal welfare and its numerous subgroups. The dialogue should not stop now, but it is time really now to act for animals, and this still during this term. The Intergroup has sent a letter on this to the European Commission and has also published it on the website. The public call for the publication of the 4 Commission proposals on animal welfare regarding that. So now the Eurogroup for Animals also warmly invites members, all the members of the Parliament as much as possible, and assistants to the no animal left behind stunt which will take on Wednesday, 11th of October from 12 to 1 o'clock, so during lunchtime or before lunchtime, in front of the Berlaymont building. So please be there. The stand will be a public statement that EU citizens expect the Commission to come forward with the 4 proposals, not only with one in December, but with the 4 proposals on animal welfare still during this time. So given the urgency and importance of this issue, I call on all the members, of course, especially of this animal welfare intergroup, to free up 1 hour to come to the Berlaymont building next Wednesday and to participate in this stand. During this stand, there will also, of course, be the possibility to record personal support messages for the publication of the package of animal welfare proposals. And then regarding the ECI Fur-Free Europe, there is an Agri-IMCO Petty hearing on the 12th of October to discuss this ECI Fur-Free Europe. And also there we invite all the intergroup members or substitutes in this committee to actively take part in this hearing to support the call of the ECI. So please support the call as well as a motion for resolution on the ECI for Free Europe. Before we really start now with the presentation, you know that this meeting is streamed online on Interaxio. It will be recorded as always, and the video and the presentations will be uploaded in the Intergroup website afterwards. So now I come definitely to the first presentation, and I will give the floor to Philippe Lymbery, CEO, Compassioning World Farming, and author of the book 60 Harvests Left. My dear Philippe, I give you the floor. Thank you.
Tilly, thank you so very much, and such a pleasure to be here, and a privilege. Great to be here in the aptly named Animal Welfare and Conservation Intergroup, and I think that was a very visionary title actually, because the two have to come together if we are to save the future for animals, people, and the planet. My message today to the European Commission, to the European Parliament, to the Council of Ministers, to Vice President Šefčovič, is that we have to act ambitiously on animal welfare. We have to end cages as the very first step in saving the future for our children. It is as simple as that. Let me explain. So, Tilly, you've very kindly brought me here to talk about the book, 60 Harvests Left. The title we'll explain in a moment, but actually what's more important is the subtitle, How to Reach a Nature-Friendly Future. The solutions that are readily at hand, that are already in the in-trays, in the processing within the Commission. We have the proposals, we have the solutions. Now let's bring them to light. And it's getting really, really pressing, because looked at through the lens of the 4 seasons, our society is currently in its summertime. A time of perpetual partying, of consuming as if the planet has no boundaries. But the browning leaves of autumn are starting to show, with growing anxiety around climate change, the collapse of nature, the rise of the risk of pandemics. Carry on as we are, and our society risks falling into a perpetual winter. Now, we all got a collective taste of perpetual winter during COVID. It showed us that our society is fragile, vulnerable, and that we don't want to get to that situation. So what we need is to move forward confidently and proudly to a new spring. A spring that is based on beautiful, life-affirming, compassionate solutions. And the Commission has these already, all bottled up. Now let's get them released. It's really important to see the rise of the concept of One Health. One Health meaning that the health of people is interlinked with the well-being of animals and a thriving environment. Essentially, we're all in this together. The way that we farm has a huge, huge bearing on the future. And it's something that I know very well, living on a farm hamlet. I'm out every day looking at our countryside, seeing how it changes. I see the good and bad in farming. I celebrate when I see our neighbours' 40 cows that are grazing the river banks near home. But I also see other things which are more disturbing. There's one that I want to share with you. It was a spring morning, and my dog Duke and I were out walking, and we saw a tractor pulling a plough. And the tractor was going up and down, ploughing its lowly furrow. And the dust was reaching out into the sky and catching the sun, creating an aura. It was a beautiful countryside scene. Yet there was something wrong. There was something missing. There were no birds following the plough. I took a closer look. The tractor ploughed across a footpath, and I was able to see the soil just as it had been upturned. I looked down, and do you know what I saw? Nothing. Not a worm or a beetle or a bug trying to get back into their home, newly turned upside down. It was lifeless. It was like sand. We could have been walking on the moon. Now, that field was being ploughed to plant maize, corn, a common crop for feeding animals. In Europe and around the world, that crop was being used was being grown using chemical pesticides and artificial fertilizers that were essentially destroying the life around and undermining the soil. No wonder the soil was washing away into the local river. And it reminded me of when I saw maize in vast monocultures being grown in the Midwest of America, the birthplace of industrial animal agriculture. And I remember seeing one of the recipient farms of that corn, a feedlot. I remember seeing hundreds of cattle all standing in barren pens, not a blade of grass in sight. It was midsummer. The heat was unbearable. They had no shade. They stood there, jostling to try to get in each other's shadow, to get some respite from the heat. It was just one example of factory farming that, of course, has now ravaged the countryside in not only America, but Europe and around the world. And here we're talking about hens being taken out of woodland edges and put into cages so small they can't even stretch their wings. Pigs, mother pigs, put in crates so narrow they can't turn around for weeks or months at a time. Cattle taking out of pastures where they convert something we can't eat, grass, into something we can, meat or milk. Instead, they're put into these houses. And what happens here is that it may look like a space-saving idea, but actually isn't. Because in taking them off of pastures and woodlands, what happens is we then have to use vast acreages of arable land elsewhere to grow their feed. Mm-hmm. And in that transaction, we waste what I call ghost waste. We waste enough food to feed 4 billion people on the planet. Half of humanity alive today. That is why 800 million people are hungry. That is why we're undermining the future for us all. One of the first things we need to do is to move beyond the caging, cramming and confining of animals. We need to move beyond cage farming. It's a nightmare that we can end. It not only is cruel to the animals and wastes a lot of food through this ghost waste, it is also integral to driving climate change. It's a major driver of wildlife declines. I would say the major driver of wildlife declines, and thereby the collapse of nature. So we need to end cage farming. The great news is that 1.4 million European citizens signed to demand it. The great news is that Commissioner Stella Kyriakides promised to end the cage age. She committed to proposing legislation to ban the use of cages in farming by 2027. The 30th of June 2021 was an historic day. The Commissioner saying that this step is needed on both moral, health and economic grounds. Hear, hear, Commissioner. Hear, hear. And now where? 2 years later on, the proposals are still not out. 2 years later on, the signs are radio silence from the President, mixed messages from the Commission, adding up to a real and tangible fear that these proposals are quietly being shelved. Why is that a mistake? It's a mistake because industrial animal agriculture, embodied by cage farming, is undermining not only the climate and the nature around us, and the health of our food, it is also undermining the very thing we need for food into the future, the soil. The UN has warned that carry on as we are, then we have just 60 harvests left, 60 years left in our world's soils. What that means is no soil, no food. Game over. One single lifetime. So big change is inevitable. That is the only thing we can say. We cannot guarantee that the proposals will come out on the banning the cages. We implore the Commission to do that. But one thing we can say is that change is inevitable. So we need to reach into our toolbox and lift out those solutions. Solutions that I frame as 3 R's: regeneration, rethinking protein, and rewilding. Taking them one by one, regeneration is about getting animals out of cages, out of factory farms, and back to the land, where they can enjoy fresh air and sunshine, where they can fertilize the soil as part of mixed rotational farming. Rethinking protein. As it stands, our food alone, if we keep on eating meat and dairy in the consumption patterns that we are, in the amounts that we are, then our food alone will trigger catastrophic climate change. In Europe, we need to reduce meat and dairy consumption by 70%. So let's rethink protein and embrace positive policies to reduce the amount of meat and dairy that we're all eating, switching to more plant-based and diverse proteins. The third solution is rewilding. And here, I'd like to say that the biggest opportunity for rewilding is through rewilding the soil. And the best way to rewild the soil, to move away from those walking on the moon scenarios that I've seen far too often with lifeless soil, the best way is to bring back the elephant. Bring back the elephant here in Strasbourg, in the countryside around, into Brussels, into every part of the European Union and beyond. And what I'm actually talking about is bringing back the elephant's weight of biodiversity that should be under every soccer pitch, every football pitch patch size of healthy soil. Every patch should have millions of worms, should have 13,000 species of life, which if you decant them, they would weigh 5 tons, as much as an African elephant. And that that elephant's weight will help us to take carbon out of the atmosphere, to conserve soil, conserve water for the future, and rebuild our soil. So we need a new day. How do we get there? Well, by the Commission, by the EU taking leadership. What does that leadership look like? Well, the first thing is to ban cages for all animals farmed in Europe. To publish and see through that ambitious revision of animal welfare legislation. To move away from industrial agriculture, as proposed in the Farm to Fork strategy, as a starting point. These beautiful, life-affirming solutions are at hand. Reducing meat and dairy. 70% is the reduction we need to get our consumption habits to fit within planetary boundaries. And respect animal sentience for what it is, not only the right thing to do. Give animals a decent life. Put kindness at the centre of our European community, but also as key to addressing the climate, biodiversity and food security challenges that we are now facing. I'd now like to show a short video, please. To the European Parliament is time is running out. You know it, we know it, we need to act. What we do now will frame the future for our children. And what we need to do now is to take the very first step in reaching that better future with beautiful, life-affirming, compassionate solutions. We need to end the cage age and ban cage farming. We need to take this opportunity for ambitious revision of the animal welfare legislation. We need to step forward with confidence and start to dismantle the folly that is industrial animal agriculture through the Farm to Fork strategy, through the Green Deal. There is no time for procrastination. There is no time to lose. Let's go do it. And let's save the future for animals, people, the planet, for our children. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we really feel like applauding. It's after this beautiful, very beautiful video you showed us, but also your very strong words, yeah, I think everything I will say now seems so weak then in comparison. So thank you very much again for your presentation, and again buy this beautiful book. So there's still hope, but we need to definitely to act now. I will open the floor now already for questions, because I've heard we have still some connection issues with Eric Lambin from the Commission. But so please take the floor if you have remarks to make, questions. Don't hesitate. Also, I see more than 40 people online. Please don't hesitate if you have questions, remarks, interventions you would like to make. We can do that already now. So trying to restore or to make the connection with, I think, Brussels. Yes. Who wants to take the floor? Manuela, please.
Yes, hello, thank you very much. I already came to your book presentation that we held in Brussels, and I was very moved by the film and by your words. And it's exactly this, that we know what it is at stake, and you said we all know, but the problem is we're sitting here in an environment who really could change something and who really has it in its hands also. And you saw how much we fought for restoring nature and how hard this was, and you saw what we are trying to do to better our lives and our planet. And there are so many interests who are working against it. And unfortunately, yesterday, for example, we had a debate on glyphosate. So there were so many MEPs saying, no, it's the right thing, and I used it already for 20 years, and scientific, it's saying that it's safe. And we presented that scientific says exactly the opposite, that this is also destroying our nature, our soils, everything. And so it is really hard work sometimes, I have to say, to go against these people and against, in the end, industry who is promoting these products. So I really hope that we can fight together and make this planet safer, healthier, but it is not always easy. So a short remark from my side on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your remark. And of course, I entirely agree with you. It's not easy. And I think now is the moment when we can recognize that big change is the only thing that is inevitable. You've probably heard me say it before, but I'll say it again, that the winds of change are gathering. Those that are trying to keep us on the failed track, they're holding on to something that ultimately will be a vain hope. What we need to do is to gather as much of the winds of change as possible through unity, through strength, through determination, and help that, use that wind to sweep us in the right direction, which is a new direction that embraces kindness, puts kindness and inclusion at the center of our society. And that means ending cages, ending factory farming, moving to a genuinely sustainable food system, actually better than sustainability. We need a regenerative food system that puts back into nature's bank account and brings forward that One Health scenario where we have a genuinely thriving environment that helps to create healthy and happy animals, and thereby reinforcing a future for people. Thank you so much.
Anja, I see you nodding. Please take the floor, please.
Well, thank you. Yes, Philip, it's always a pleasure to hear your presentations, and they are always very inspiring. And yes, it's good to hear about the wonders of nature and explaining once more why we need to liberate the animals from the food chain and why we need to end their lives cramped and confinement and in cages. So we need to change a lot in our habits altogether. But as a rapporteur of the Farm to Fork report, I share your, well, I wanted to say concern, but I changed my mind. Your words of hope that we desperately need this sustainable food systems framework law and desperately need the animal welfare legislation. And I just can say that I hope that I'm convinced as well that the Animal Welfare Intergroup will fight together with you to get this legislation on the table.
Thank you so much, and I think that the Farm to Fork strategy is a crucial file that can't wait, and it doesn't go far enough, of course, but it's a big, big start. The whole idea of reducing pesticides by half, reducing the use of artificial fertilizers, rolling out organic over much more of the land, and all that goes with that is just a huge, big, necessary step towards that regenerative future that we need. And thank you for all that you're doing, and hats off to you. Thank you.
Somebody else who wants to take the floor? Thank you also for your intervention yesterday during the plenary. I think that was a good moment on the World Day for Animals to really also make a call again that we are waiting also for this legislation. And it's really a scandal that for reasons that has nothing to do with animals, those files are not coming out, those proposals, except one in December, but we all know that we are not going to be able to finish it. It comes out, but voilà. But we want 4 of them, and we will keep on fighting for the 4 of them. I look at the other members, or somebody else who wants to take the floor. Don't hesitate. I'm also looking at the technical. No, we don't have connection with Eric Lambin. So most of the time, I'm really out of time. I'm going over time. So this time, maybe, if we cannot have this connection, which would really be pity, no. So? We need a few minutes more. Yes, so an intervention coming there, please.
Sorry. I just have a question. I mean, it is a very beautiful idea to make a change for the environment in the parliament and have a lot of MEPs have their voices to make a change. But I think there is another issue, which is especially in the factories and where the producers are sitting, so they want the benefits. And there are also the small farmers who don't have the money to actually make a change and renovate the whole farm to make the living for these animals happen. So how are we, even if the parliament is going to decide to stop the cages, how are we supposed to educate and help the farmers and make the producers stop thinking about the benefits only, because it's going to cost a lot and not many people are happy to pay, I'd say.
Thank you. A great question. I think the first thing to say is that where we are now with industrial animal agriculture that is undermining our very future, it is not the fault of farmers. That is the first thing to be really clear about. It is the unintended consequence of decades of farm policy and agricultural subsidy. So I think what we can do is we can learn from the past and we can use the tools at hand to redirect agriculture toward that better future. What we know is that a large part of the EU's entire central budget goes to subsidising agriculture, much of that driving intensification. That needs to change, but it's a big opportunity to use those billions of euros every year to incentivise doing the right thing. And the great thing is that moving to these more land-based regenerative ways of farming are much less capital intensive. You need to invest much less. You need to buy much less, if any, artificial fertilizers and chemical pesticides. You don't need any cages. Hurrah! You don't need all of the animal pharmaceuticals for diseased animals or lots of feed from crops that should be feeding people. So it's actually a cheaper way for farmers to get involved and to switch. But I think the other point is on the price of food, is that we have to rethink our society. Because at the moment, we've got a society where you can have decent food if you can afford it. What an awful thing that is. And I hear people saying, well, some people who try to justify the cruelty of factory farming by saying, we need it to feed the poor. And in what kind of bonkers society, twisted scenario do we have where we think it's all right, that it's right for people on low incomes to have to feed their children on poor quality factory farmed food? What on earth? So what I say is let's move forward with confidence. Let's redirect those subsidies. Let's get behind the farming community for a brighter future. And let's make decent food an absolute human right for every single citizen everywhere. Thank you so much for your question.
Thank you again for these strong words. Indeed, you said it before, if the common agricultural policy would be coherent also to the farm to fork strategy and in general to our climate targets, also to fight biodiversity loss, etc., to fight antimicrobial resistance, because also that is linked to intensive farming. We should support those farmers, those small farmers that respect nature, that really work in the agroecology, and then that would be the solution. And if we look, I always say conventional food, when you look at all the externalities, is not cheaper for the taxpayers. So really not. You have to regenerate, make the water healthy again, etc. All that is, of course, also linked to costs. It's dying, our soils are dying. Everything was said already. So, but if we would use that money, that enormous instrument for reorientation of the agriculture in the right way, there would be possibilities to support also small farmer. But it was an excellent question, so thank you for that. And now I think we also have the connection with Eric Lambin, who is from the group of chief of scientific advisors of the European Commission. I don't know if we are able to see him. Yes, we can also see him. Perfect. I will give you the floor immediately. Welcome and happy to see you and to hear you now, Eric Lambin. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and sorry for the internet issues. So, if I can have the slides, thank you. And I will basically do two things. I will first summarize 3 very recent studies on the impact on the environment of our diet, published this summer, really recent, and then I will summarize some of our recommendations as chief scientific advisors. Next slide, please. So first study, an enormous data collection, 55,000 UK households have been studied in terms of their diet. Next slide. And they've been categorized into high meat diet all the way to vegan diet with 3 intermediate diet categories. And the numbers are stunning. It shows if you compare the high meat to the vegan, or the low meat consumption, greenhouse gas emissions per person for a diet based on 2,000 calories a day are 4 times higher for the high meat diet. The use of land, the land use associated with food production is also 4 times higher for the high meat diet compared to the vegan one. And water use is twice as high for the high meat diet compared to the vegan. So really a very major difference in ecological footprint. Next. The second recent studies published just a couple of weeks ago address the same issue, but through a large-scale modeling exercise. They model the global food system as it is now, and then they do a scenario assuming, next slide please, that 50% of the animal source products would be substituted by these novel alternatives that bring equivalent amount of protein, and this by 2050. And then they simulate what would happen to a range of environmental variables if this is taking place. And I emphasize only 50% of animal source products are substituted. In that case, global agricultural area declines by 12%. All forest and natural land, the expansion, the reduction, the deforestation, and the conversion of natural land is almost completely halted. And therefore, the greenhouse gas emissions associated with agriculture and land use decline by 31%, almost a third. Now, if all this land that is being spared for nature is actively restored, this is equivalent to an additional carbon sequestration of 6.3 gigaton, which is a huge amount compared to what we emit every year. Water use declines as well, and we almost meet a large fraction of our global biodiversity targets. Next slide. So this all sounds great. So why are we not doing it? Because the focus so far has mostly been on the upscaling, the blue curve here, of these alternative proteins, alternative source of proteins, and of the vegan or vegetarian diet. But very little effort has been put into phasing out, that's the orange light, the existing food regime that's very largely based on animal source products. The third study, next slide please, has been looking at that in great detail, and I'm co-author of that study. We really look very carefully, a very large data collection effort. We look carefully at how much money, how much public spending is there for the animal farming sector versus the animal product analogs, these plant-based alternatives, and how much lobbying expenses also are being taking place in the two sectors. And we did it for the EU and for the US. Next slide. So if we look here, so we have animal farming here on top, and then EU, US, and then the analogs, EU, US. Overall, public spending for the animal farming system is 1,200 times larger than for its most sustainable alternative, the plant-based analogs, 1,200 times. And if you look carefully at this graph, so this is true already for just research and innovation. This is, of course, largely true for production, but also for commercialization. So we are publicly financing the animal farming much, much, much more than we do for the plant-based analogs, even though it is an emerging industry with great potential for sustainability, as the previous slides have shown. Next slide, please. We also looked at the spending by lobbyists, the trade association representing these two sectors in the EU. The animal farming system, what we call the incumbent system, spend 3 times more for lobbying than for the novel products, these alternatives. And we also looked carefully at what are the themes for lobbying. And of course, a lot of it is related to labeling of food and the naming of things like milk and steak and burger and sausages, the animal farming sector, lobbying to make sure that these names are not applied to the plant-based analogs. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's the background, and this study that I've just shown had a very large echo in the newspaper over the summer, with this Guardian article and more than 35 news stories in European media. So that really attracts a lot of the attention of the media. Next. Okay, now I change hats. I've been talking as a scientist working on these questions. Now I'm going to talk briefly as member of the group of chief scientific advisors. We are a group of 7 scientists, and we are advising the College of Commissioners on issues, on a wide range of issues. And I just led a report on sustainable food consumption that was published late June. This was produced based on a very transparent process where we consulted the best experts in food system in Europe, who assembled as a working group for about 6 months and identified all the scientific evidence that allowed us to extract some key policy recommendations. Next. Two key concepts here. One is the concept of food environment, that is anywhere where people obtain, eat, discuss food. In order to shift to more sustainable consumption, we need to change the food environment. We cannot rely only on decisions by individual consumers. We need to work on retailers, labeling, digital platforms where food is being discussed. Second key concept, policy mix. There's not one policy that will do the trick. We need many complementary policies that will reinforce each other. And they fall in three categories. First, it's related to incentives and disincentives. We need to make sure that the healthy and sustainable diets are the easiest and most affordable choice. And that can be done through taxing, not as a punitive measure, but simply to make sure that the unsustainable and unhealthy products, when they are consumed too frequently, support their own externalities. They support their own social cost. We could also make healthy and sustainable diets more affordable by playing on VAT and, of course, adjusting subsidy schemes, as I've shown in the third of these studies. Next slide, please. The second category of interventions should be around informing consumers and education. National dietary guidelines are key elements to guide dietary choice in public canteens. None of these dietary guidelines emphasize plant-based diets except for the recently modified Nordic guidelines that have just been released this summer. I just skip here some, but of course, large information education programs to raise consumer awareness can really help make the other measures more acceptable, with greater level of compliance. And in that respect, the digital food environment offers new opportunities to educating consumers. And third and last slide, please. Last slide, okay. And a third group of interventions is related to mandates. We try to keep these as a minimum. It's always better to solve these issues via education, via market incentives. But there are a few things that have to be mandated, we think. For example, it's shown that how you place food products in a supermarket, in a retail outlet, does influence consumers, and therefore regulating the placement of the sustainable alternatives, in a more visible, accessible way will have an impact on consumer behavior. Same way, mandating some food product reformulation when alternatives do exist will also contribute to increase availability of healthy and sustainable food. Next, as a concluding slide, so really what we have to do is a food system transformation where we have these niche innovations that are there, they are more sustainable, they become more affordable, but they have to replace the existing food system regime that's heavily resisting, for completely understandable reason, any change in their way of doing. And so only some external intervention through policy, education, awareness about the climate impact and health impact of this existing regime will facilitate this substitution, this replacement, this transformation of the food regime. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for this very, very interesting presentation. And I open quickly the floor. We only have 4 minutes left, but Sarah Wiener wanted to take the floor. Please, Sarah.
Ja, ich werde auf.
Thank you. I'll be speaking German, and I hope you can follow. Hope you've got the interpretation coming through. Can you follow me? Good. Thank you very much for the presentation. It contained a lot of interesting information. I was a bit surprised, however, to see one of the analyses of when you were talking about plant-based replacement or substitute products. I'm not sure what you mean by that. For me, plant products are not replacements. Rather, they are foodstuffs in their own right. Which there's no lack of them. There's no shortfall to be made up here. You were also talking about innovation and the use of substitute products in that context, I'm assuming you're talking about sort of surrogate sources of protein, for example, so plant-based copies, if I may say, as in to say sort of fake meat products, as it were, which are plant-based. I think that's personally quite a hazardous path to go down, because I have serious doubts as to whether biodiversity and nature can be aided if we go down that path. If you look at water consumption, energy consumption, look at the patent rights, monopolies, and the loss of biodiversity, I would simply dissuade you, if I can, from celebrating or promoting a new industry which is doing the same thing essentially as the intensive animal husbandry industry. I mean, there are venture capitalists are pouring billions into this industry for a reason. Let's not say we get. Yes, we need humane agriculture, but let's not. But of course, we need better. We need symbiosis between both animals and plants. We need carbon sinks, but let's not simply say let's eliminate the animals and assume that will solve all the problems. Rather, the problem is more deeply rooted than that. So maybe I've misunderstood, but in any case, I can't really follow the arguments you made in that context. Now I see your point that repositioning food products in the supermarket encourages you to adopt different purchasing patterns, but let's not pretend we haven't got a choice about who sells what. I mean, we have supermarkets which have a virtual monopoly on what we eat, selling low-grade products a lot of the time, and a choice essentially becomes a choice between one poor product and an even poorer quality product. That's not the way. That's not the future either. In any case, we need to be certain about what kind of meat we're talking about, what kind of animal husbandry we're talking about, and what kind of plant-based products we're talking about. Those definitions we need to have. Ensure that we're all on the same side. I'd like to have clarity on that, because I can see actually this is a very risky path to go down if we simply pretend that these problems can be solved with simple solutions. Thank you. I realise my time's up. Thanks.
Definitely good. The message, Eric Lambin, I'll let you react, and then I have Anja Hazekamp, and I thank in advance to interpreters that we can go 5 minutes over. Thank you very much for that.
Yes, very quickly. Thank you. And I agree what you say. I think we need to recognize there's a great heterogeneity in consumer preference. And some consumers will go through the vegan or vegetarian diet. Some will maintain some quality consumption of animal source products, and that's perfectly fine. And some will need these kind of meat analog products in order to facilitate the transition. And when I was mentioning these plant-based kind of animal source product, animal analog, this is really to facilitate that transition. It can also include some insect-based protein, some algae-based protein. There's the industry around culture meats that's still emerging. But I think it's really important to respect the diversity of options for the consumers, depending on different preference for different people.
Thank you very much for this further explanations. Anja Hazekamp, you have the floor. The last remark, question, please.
Thank you. Just a quick question. In your presentation and also from other studies, it's clear that reducing animal product consumption is key to improve health, tackling climate crisis, biodiversity crisis, etc. Could you give me an example from the every day-to-day life, what retailers can do to enable consumers to choose less animal products and higher welfare products? Because you said that it's also difficult to convince consumers. So please help us out here.
Right.
Yes, go ahead, please, Eric Lambin, please.
Yes, very clear labeling schemes, informing the consumer on exactly what they buy and what's the impact throughout the supply chain. And I'll just take two, placement in the retail outlets of these products, making sure that the products that are more respectful of animal welfare are more visible, highly accessible, and presented in a way that they are very attractive for the consumers. These would be the two main things that you talk about the retail sector that they could do. And pricing, of course, I mentioned pricing, but that's quite clear also. Yes.
Thank you very much. And I think here in the Animal Welfare Intergroup, of course, the priority is really animal welfare. And there we try to find a solution to reduce this enormous suffering for billions of animals. So I come already to the conclusion. Thank you very much to all of you for your very interesting inputs. I really want to thank again Philippe Lymbery and Eric Lambin for stressing the importance of food system change we need to have with more plant-based diets and less and better animal products, and providing science-based policy recommendations that help consumers to eat more healthily and sustainably. As we can conclude from the presentation, we really need to call also on the Commission, and we should continue to publish this framework for a sustainable food system. We hear and we see that we need to discuss this alongside with the revision of the animal welfare legislation. And then what we're going to do is a proposal for a letter to the European Commission President on the framework for a sustainable food system. So following up the informative presentation and today's debate, I would suggest that the Intergroup prepares a letter to the Commission in support of including the framework for sustainable food system in the Commission's work programme, highlighting the need for this law to be published also within this term. So let me just inform you also that the next session will take place already the 19th of October, and its item of debate will be announced as soon as possible. So I'm looking very, very forward to seeing you then. And take care, and let's put pressure on the Commission. So be there on next Wednesday for the stand we are making in front of the Berlaymont building in order to have all the proposals on the revision of animal welfare legislation. So during lunchtime at 12 o'clock next Wednesday in front of the Berlaymont building, please note the date and time. And thank you again for the experts for joining us. Have a good day. Thank you. Take care.